is the KEF KASA500 actually good for? Who should walk away? And does it justify its price tag for a typical home audio buyer? Those are the three questions that keep most people up at night when they stare at a sleek black box that promises to turn passive speakers into a full-blown sound system. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Before you click Add to Cart, let's walk through the everyday scenarios where this little amplifier shines, where it trips up, and whether the trade-offs line up with what you really need in a living room or office. First off, the KASA500 is positioned as a mini Class D amp that can drive a pair of bookshelf or wall-mounted KEF speakers up to 50 watts per channel. That sounds like enough juice for most small to medium rooms, but the real test is how that power translates when you're actually streaming a movie, cranking up a playlist, or running a background soundtrack while you work. I've spent the past few weeks setting it up in 3 different environments: a 12-square-meter apartment living room, a home office with a desk-mounted monitor, and a modestly sized home theater corner where the speakers are tucked behind a low bookshelf. In the apartment, the biggest concern was volume. The previous amp I used would hit distortion at around 70% of the volume knob, which forced me to keep the TV at a lower level and rely on subtitles. The KASA500's bridge mode, which combines the 2 channels into a single 100-watt output, gave me an extra headroom boost without any audible clipping. When I pushed the volume to watch a late-night thriller, the dialogue stayed clear, the low end stayed tight, and the high frequencies didn't become harsh. That practical strength, the ability to stay clean at higher output, is a tangible win for anyone who likes a cinematic experience without constantly turning up the TV. Now, contrast that with the home office. Here the key is subtlety. I needed background music that filled the space just enough to mask street noise but didn't bleed into conference calls. The KASA500's built-in crossover lets you set a low-pass point that tailors the bass response to the size of the room, and the 12-volt trigger input makes it easy to sync the amp with my PC's power-on signal. The result was a seamless, always-in vibe. The amp turned on the moment I logged into my workstation, and the speakers delivered a warm, balanced tone that stayed in the background without becoming a distraction. For anyone whose daily routine involves both work and occasional listening sessions, that trigger feature is a real convenience you won't find on many entry-level amps. The third setup, the makeshift home theater, showed where the KASA500 can feel a bit limited. The unit offers a single line-level input, which means you have to choose between feeding it from your TV, a streaming device, or a DAC, but you can't juggle all 3 at once without a splitter. In a typical living room setup where you might switch between a game console, a Blu-ray player, and a streaming stick, that single input design forces you to manually change cables or rely on an external selector. It's a practical weakness that can become a hassle if you're looking for a plug-and-play solution that accommodates multiple sources. Another point that often gets overlooked is the hidden trade-off between power and efficiency. The KASA500 runs on a Class D topology, which is great for keeping the unit compact and cool, but it also means you need to pair it with speakers that have a decent sensitivity rating, ideally 88 dB plus 1W/1M. If you try to drive a low-sensitivity floor-standing pair, you'll find yourself turning the volume knob up to the max just to get the same punch you'd get at half the knob with a more efficient speaker. So the value proposition really shines when you're already invested in KEF's higher sensitivity speakers or similar models. If you're buying the amp as a universal solution for a mixed bag of low-efficiency drivers, you might end up feeling shortchanged. Speaking of value, the price sits in the mid-range for dedicated stereo amps, and that's where the real question of worth it comes into play. Compared to a generic 50-watt Class D amp from a no-name brand, the KASA500 adds a few niceties: the KEF crossover, the bridge mode, and the 12-volt trigger input. Those features translate directly into less fiddling and a cleaner sound in the scenarios I described. If you're a casual listener who only streams Spotify from a phone, you could probably get away with a cheaper unit and still be happy. But if you're the type who watches movies with surround sound, runs a home studio, or wants a tidy, single-box solution that integrates neatly with KEF speakers, the extra spend starts to make sense. Now, who should skip it? First, anyone with a very tight budget and a willingness to wrestle with basic volume knobs and manual source switching. Second, owners of low-sensitivity speakers that demand more than 50 watts per channel to reach a comfortable listening level. They'll likely need a beefier amp. Third, users who need multi-input flexibility.